Good evening. I'd like to call the East Lyme Zoning Commission regular meeting of October 1st, 2020 to order at 7:32 p.m. This meeting, as we all know, is being held via video conference on Zoom. First order of business is to do a roll call, which is going to involve identifying which commission members are present and also to identify interested parties that are present. This should be viewed from the participant pane on the right. And let me go through the list of who we are looking for, which is also going to include staff. I'm going to begin with commission members. And if each of you would just give it here and raise your hand, a verbal acknowledgement. Terry Donovan.
Here.
Bill Dwyer.
He's here, but for some reason he's muted.
Bill Dwyer is muted right now. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
looking at.
He
Okay,
has himself muted.
Kim Kay.
I am here. Hello.
Thanks, Kim. Hello. Norm Peck.
Here.
Okay. Ann Thurlow.
Here.
Here. So we do have a full commission. We do need Mr. Dwyer to become unmuted, hopefully. We have alternates. Let me see what alternates are here. Mr. Liska, James Liska. Is Jim here?
Yeah,
No?
I'm here. Hi, Matt.
Okay, Jim. Hey, Jim.
Yep.
Denise Markovitz.
I'm here.
Okay, Denise. George McPherson.
Yeah.
All right, we have a full roster. Excellent. And moving right along, we have some participating applicants that we would like to identify and ensure that they are here. Attorney Tim Hollister.
He's here.
Very good. And the applicant owner, Glenn Russo. Is he here tonight?
I believe he is.
He's on. He's not on video and he's muted.
Right.
Okay, very good. And then moving right along to staff, zoning official Bill Mulholland is here, I can see. Bill?
Here.
And we also have town attorney Mark Zamarka is present tonight, and he will be here through the entire hearing process. Attorney Zamarka. We also have Jennifer Lindo, our administrative assistant, who will be moderating tonight's meeting to help us hopefully move along in an orderly fashion. Brooke Stevens, our recording secretary. Hey, Brooke. And then Roseanne Hardy, our ex officio. I'm not sure if Roseanne is going to make it to tonight's meeting or not.
I don't think so. I haven't seen her.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Let me just go through the guidelines real quick of the Zoom meeting. I just want to read these to the audience. Please remember that while muted, we can hear you and everything going on around you. We can also see you. Board members and staff will be unmuted during the entire meeting. As required by executive order, everyone must state their name and where they are from prior to speaking. For example, Matt Walker, commission member. You don't have to say where you're from, what town, what street. Commission member is sufficient for us. If you're Harry White on 123 Main Street, it's Harry White, 123 Main Street, as is customary each time you speak. During public delegations, Jen will open lines for comment. Please wait to be called on to speak. Once you have finished speaking, please mute your microphone or phone. During each agenda item, only the board, staff, and presenters will be unmuted to speak on that particular item. Only one person may speak at a time. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait to be called upon. Board members will be called upon to provide comment via a roll call. Members and alternates, for all motions, in the interest of making sure we have a clear record, please plan on roll call votes so the public and Brooke, who's taking minutes, can be very clear on the record. Only hosts are permitted to share screens at this time. Any documents to be shared must come through Jen at jlindo@eltownhall.com. And I'll further add that as required by executive order, all documents being discussed and reviewed at the meeting must have been posted on the town website no later than 24 hours prior to the meeting. This entire meeting is automatically recorded by Zoom, and upon the host logging out, the meeting will cease, and so will the recording. The meeting cannot continue without the host. And with that said, with the ground rules being laid, we'll move right on to public delegations, which is time set aside for members of the public to address the commission regarding items, topics, subjects not appearing on tonight's agenda. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to be heard regarding any issues, items, topics not appearing on tonight's agenda? Okay, and moving on to the public
Not seeing
hearing.
anybody asking to speak, so I think we're good.
Okay, excellent. Moving on to the public hearing segment, and I will just first note that if a member of the public at the appropriate time wishes to speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you must send a message via the Zoom chat feature to Jennifer. She will maintain a list of speakers for public comment. So I hope we're clear on that. That'll help things go in an orderly fashion as well. With that said, we'll move right on to item number 1, and it's the only item, only public hearing item tonight, and that is the application of Landmark Development Group, LLC, and Jarvis of Cheshire, LLC, CO Timothy Hollister, Shipman and Goodwin, LLP, for a text amendment revision of section 32 to replace preliminary site plan / final site plan with quote unquote master plan procedure as used in gateway development. We just have a few housekeeping items, I should say, to note and read, which is customary at every zoning meeting. Our referral responses, we always read into the record first. It shouldn't take more than 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to guess no more than that. And then at that point, we're going to go right to our presentation by the applicant, which I believe is going to be presented by Attorney Hollister, then questions by the commission, and then we'll move on to that public comment segment, which may be a little time consuming as well. So with that
Chairman
said,
Walker, I believe Attorney Hollister has his hand up.
yes, Attorney Hollister.
Yeah, point of order, Mr. Chairman. Can you just identify what is going to be read into the record before the applicant gets to present?
Most certainly. Most certainly. So we have 3 letters, Attorney Hollister, and again, it's pretty much standard operating procedure for us. If we have any outside referral letters or commentary or recommendations, we always take those first in every meeting that I've been on since 2009. And the first one is a letter from the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments. The second is a letter from DEEP, and the third is a letter from planning. That's our own planning department with the town of East Lyme. 15, 20 minutes, and we move right to you, Attorney Hollister. Okay?
All right. If it's limited to that, thank you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Very good. So with that, Terry, our good secretary, if you could begin by reading the letter from the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Terrence Donovan, committee member. This letter is dated September 8th, 2020 to Mr. Matthew Walker, Chairman, Town of East Lyme Zoning Commission. Dear Mr. Walker, I am writing in response to an application to amend the zoning regulations of the Town of East Lyme. The application was referred to this agency pursuant to Section 8-3B of the Connecticut General Statutes in correspondence dated August 17th. The proposed regulation amendments seek to make changes to the bulk regulations of the affordable housing districts and allow for a conceptual quotation, affordable housing master development plan, end quotation, to accompany any application for a zone change to AHD. Based on a review of the material submitted, SCCOG, staff determined that the proposed amendments are not likely to result in an adverse intermunicipal impact. If you have any questions, please contact me, Samuel Alexander.
Thanks, Terry. And moving right on to our letter from DEEP. That's usually Marcy Balint.
Correct. This one's a while. All right. Excuse me. This is from DWP, Land and Water Resources Division, dated September 29th, 2020, to the East Lyme Zoning Commission. Subject, proposed zone regulation amendment to Section 32 for the application of Landmark Development Group, LLC, and Jarvis of Cheshire, LLC. Dear Commissioners, thank you for notifying the Land and Water Resource Division of the proposed zone regulation amendment referred above and received on August received on, excuse me, on August 17th. I think there's a little typo there. 17/2020. Acting as the commissioner's staff, our office has reviewed the revised proposal for consistency with the policies and standards of the Connecticut Coastal Management Act, CCMA, Connecticut General Statutes, CGS, sections 22A-90 through 22A-112, inclusive, close parentheses, and offers the following comments. As the commission is aware, the Land and Water Resource Division, formerly OLISP, has commented many times on coastal site plan review and zone change applications related to landmark development group proposal at this site. Over the years, we have provided detailed coastal management and environmental comments concerning potential adverse impacts associated with intense development on a resource-sensitive, steep and rocky site adjacent to the Niantic River. While we might take issue with the certain aspects Mr. Hollister's introductory statement, we will confine our comments to the language of the zone change proposal that was submitted. In that regard, we offer the following for the Commission's consideration. 1. 32.9 General Provisions. There are 3 ways proposed to initiate designation as an affordable housing development. Conceptual site plan, affordable housing master development plan, and site plan. These are not necessarily concurrent, but may be, or stand alone, depending on what is chosen. It appears one can get both in AHMDP and then site plan approval, or one can simply get an SP approval, which is confusing, and the logic behind the various options is hard to clearly understand at face value. 2. 32.9.2.H, Master Plan Elements. This section suggests that coastal site plan review, CSPR, requirements and analysis as outlined in Connecticut General Statutes section 22A-105 through 109 would not apply as statutory required. Required. Rather, it would only apply, quote, where residential development is proposed, end quote. Specifically in contrast to the CCMA's requirements, which require projects partially or fully located in the coastal boundary, end quote, to be subject to CSPR and CCMA requirements. 3. 32.9.2.H Master Plan Elements. Also, this section notes the only coastal resource information is limited to a, quote, description of resources, end quote, where actual, quote, residential development occurs, end quote. It has been our office's long-term experience that all aspects of development, road building, blasting, land clearing, stormwater management measures that drain or discharge to coastal water bodies, and wetlands downhill, along with analysis of such activities on coastal resources, including wetlands, vernal ponds, water quality, or equally, if not more important, in the CSPR impact analysis process. Therefore, this requires more than a, quote, description, end quote, but an analysis of potential adverse impacts and how to avoid and or best minimize such impacts. See coastal site plan, fact sheet attached. Number 4, 32.9.4, decisions on site plans. While the initial AHMDP approval seems to discount the CCMA and CSPR process, the ultimate site plan approval after the commission approval, after the AHMDP approval, along with section 24 info, would appear to force a commission approval without benefit of resource and water quality considerations and analysis. In fact, this section requires the commission, quote, shall approve the SP, end quote, contrary to the tenets of the planning and zoning to render a decision based on all required information prior to a decision. Number 5, 32.9.2.h Master Plan elements. This section would also limit coastal resource information to that depicted in DWP's, quote, Coastal Resources Map dated 1979, end quote. This map, which is only available in paper form, has never had any legal significance and is likely to be inaccurate and out of date. Coastal resources data should be presented and analyzed using the best available information and technology. And analysis and any resource impact should be based on what currently exists on the site, not a map over 40 years old. Number 6, 32.9.2.h Master Plan elements. This section would, quote, exclude driveways, which are exempt uses within the coastal zone, end quote. However, driveways are not necessarily or always exempt from coastal site plan review. For instance, our comments in 2015 to the Commission noted this previously on an earlier application, end parentheses. Section 22A-109 sub B states that the Commission, quote, may, end quote, exempt certain minor uses from coastal site plan review. Indeed, smaller uses such as driveways, garages, pools, accessory structures, or clear cutting can often create significant impacts and should not be exempt from a master plan review of a large and significant development proposal. Not requiring coastal resource information for, quote, driveways, end quote, or internal access roads as proposed would omit the exact analysis required for thorough analysis of potential adverse impacts to resources at the site, contrary to the fundamentals of the CCMA. Number 7, further, and to reiterate, a coastal site plan review application is required for any proposed development pursuant to CGS 22A-105 sub B, which requires, quote, coastal site plan reviews, end quote, for certain site plans and applications for activities or projects located fully or partially within the coastal boundary. The large access road, parentheses, previously referred to as, quote, boulevard, end quote, in prior site plans, close parentheses, goes directly across the coastal boundary areas over rocky and steep terrain, posing direct and potential impacts to a coastal resource and water quality, and is therefore not eligible for exemption as a minor activity under Connecticut General Statutes 22A-109 sub B. 8, coastal, quote, zone, end quote, is not a legal definition per CCMA. The correct terminology is, quote, coastal boundary, end quote, which is statutorily defined as Connecticut General Statutes 22A-94 sub B. Number 9, in summary, it is unclear at what point the statutory required CSPR would be triggered if this zone change proposal were adopted. Would it be at the preliminary, in quotes, AHMDP or site plan stage, or just ignored or minimalized? Question mark. The AHMDP would seem to undermine the tenets of the CCMA by restricting coastal site plan review to, quote, where residential development occurs, end quote. Also, the proposal appears to strictly tie in Commission hands the original AHMDP, requiring they shall, in quotes, approve. If the basic information required and ignoring the long-standing documented environmental, policy, and plan concerns with development at this 236-acre site. Without a full coastal site plan application, with all information and analysis, and the ability to make a decision based on that, the CCMA appears to be, quote, written out, end quote, of this proposal. We recommend revisions to the zone regulation amendment to address the insufficiencies above, with clear specification as to when a coastal site plan is required for the entire development site as statutory consistent and required pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 22A-105 through 109 of the CCMA. These comments are made in response to the review requirement contained in the Connecticut General Statutes, Section 22A-104 sub B, which requires that any zoning regulations or changes thereto affecting the area within the coastal boundary shall be consistent with the policies of Connecticut General Statutes, Section 22A-92, and the criteria of subsection B and of Section 22A-102 of the CCMA. Further, this section requires that notification be sent to the Commissioner of the Energy and Environmental Protection at least 35 days prior to the commencement of the public hearing. Once notified, our office is responsible for reviewing the proposal's consistency with the policies of Section 22A-92 and the criteria of Section 22A-102 sub B of the CCMA. Should you have any questions regarding this letter, please feel free to contact me, Marcy Blint, Coastal Planner. Then as attached is coastal site plan review.
All right, so the only thing left, just the letter from planning is all we have left, and then we'll hear from the applicant.
You bet. Give me one sec, please.
Yeah. Catch your breath.
Okay. This letter is dated September 15th, 2020 to Matt Walker, Chairman, East Lyme Zoning Commission, regarding a zoning referral, application of Landmark Development Group, LLC, and Jarvis of Cheshire, LLC, care of Timothy Hollister, Shipman and Goodwin, LLP, application to amend the East Lyme Zoning Regulations 32, Affordable House District. Chairman Walker, the East Lyme Planning Commission, at its meeting of September 1st, 2020, found the above referenced text amendment, inconsistent with the 2009 East Lyme Plan of Conservation and Development as amended for the following reasons. 1, it does not encourage affordable housing in the IHZ or within our downtown villages. Number 2, we cannot adequately know the impact of the proposed regulation without knowing the residential makeup of the development, parentheses, i.e. elderly versus market rate. 3, the proposed language eliminates the need for a statement describing any impact on public health and safety, including emergency services. 4, the reduction in engineering standards may result in unintended environmental consequences, particularly in relation to stormwater management. 5, the proposed regulation, section 32.4.2, proposes increases in the building heights, which as AHDs may be located in low-density areas. Such building heights may not be in keeping with the traditional New England character as defined in the POCD Objective 1.1. 6, reducing the setbacks and buffer requirements may create negative environmental impacts. Number 7, the current zoning regulations section 32.9.1 permits a preliminary site plan, the purpose of which is to require the submission to the Zoning Commission of information sufficient to allow it to evaluate the development plan for under the standard of 830G, and to allow an applicant to defer until approval is granted. Completion of details and specifications that will define what is to be built but are not essential to the 830G analysis. The proposed regulation is essentially the same.
Thank you, Terry. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Did you sign Chairman Michelle Rish-Williams?
Okay. All right, moving right along to the presentation by the applicant, who's here on behalf of the applicant, Attorney Hollister. Good evening, Good evening, Attorney Hollister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen. Tim Hollister, sitting in my dining room in Hartford, talking to you this evening about Landmark and 236 acres that Landmark and Jarvis of Cheshire own. Mr. Russo, my client, is on the line and will speak if necessary. I will note for the record that we reviewed the published notice. That was correct, and a copy of the text amendment was timely filed with the town clerk. I want to thank Ms. Lindo for her logistical help. We submitted some fairly extensive materials electronically on Tuesday of this week. I will say that one of the reasons we had hoped to do it earlier until we found that the 2008 minutes, which are the bulk of what we submitted, are not online. And we had to go get those at the town hall. So that was the reason for a delay in filing that. I also want to say at the outset that we don't expect to close the hearing tonight. There were a bunch of letters, several that are lengthy, one from Save the Sound, one from us, Friends of Oswegatchie Hills, and we'll want to review those and probably respond in writing, which was not possible in the last 24 hours. What I want to do now is summarize the application as follows. And I didn't want to put my foot down and say the applicant has to go first, but it's very unfortunate that Marcy Balint's letter got read, because, as I will come back to, her letter is completely wrong. She doesn't understand what is being proposed here, and that's just very unfortunate. And it kind of poisons the atmosphere to have that kind of a letter read before the applicant has even had the chance to explain what it's applying for and why. So just a point that I didn't object to, because I did not wish to get into an argument about a procedure at the start of the hearing. But a common sense and very important method of development of large parcels of land, whether they are residential, whether they're mixed use, whether they're anything else, is a two-step process: a master plan followed by a final site plan. A master plan is generally understood to be an overall layout of what I call the macro elements: identification of use, location of buildings, location of roads, location of utilities, proposed open space, identification of where the wetlands are, putting impacts aside to later, and noting where coastal boundaries are, where environmental resources are located. But not detailed engineering, not grading, not stormwater detail, not a high-intensity soil survey where a soil scientist goes inch by inch across a very large property and maps all the soils, whether they're wetlands or non-wetland soils. And certainly not a full-blown stormwater management, and certainly not a complete wetlands application that would be filed for a wetlands permit. In a master plan, these are elements that are deferred to the final site plan stage. Now, if I put on dark glasses, not here, but if I were to do that, avoiding the master plan is a well-known technique of opposing larger developments. It's basically trying to make the applicant spend many more dollars and hours and effort on something that isn't necessary yet in the process. It is a well-known and occasionally used technique of opposition to land development to require a final site plan before it's necessary. But the master plan approach is a benefit to the town and to the property owner and even to the public, because what you're doing is you're trying to identify and lock in the major elements without forcing the applicant, the town staff, the commission, or the public to come immersed in details that may well be superseded, changed along the way until there is agreement on the major elements of the overall plan. That is what a master plan is. Now, this commission and the town of East Lyme have used this approach, this master plan approach, twice in the last 15 years on very large developments. The first was the so-called Darrow Pond development, which was entirely residential. I believe it was a plan of on the order of 600 units. And it's also used it for the mixed-use development that is known as Gateway. And for Gateway, the master plan was approved in 2008. And then after the recession had dissipated, the applicant came in for final site plan 5 years later, 2013, and basically, by the way, got approved in one night. In this particular instance, for Landmark, in 2011, a Superior Court judge overruling this commission's 2007 denial of Landmark's original zoning application, ordered the zoning commission to adopt a regulation that in effect contained this two-step process. It was called a preliminary site plan and then a final site plan, but it was the same concept: master plan first and final site plan second. and that was adopted by the commission in 2013. At that time, Landmark accepted that regulation because it was our expectation, it was our understanding that this was a two-step process. We thought we had worked with the commission to adopt a regulation providing functionally a master plan, final site plan structure. But unfortunately, we came before this commission in 2015 with a rezoning of 123 of Landmark's 236 acres to affordable housing development, and with an agreement to set aside 87 acres, 87 of the 236 acres as open space, by the way, at no cost to the town, which we thought was fulfilling a long-held request by the town for a significant donation of open space. We made that a proposal. And then to develop 36 plus or minus acres at the western edge of the property, and proposing as a preliminary site plan a layout of uses, layout of roads, buildings, utilities, identifying where the wetlands generally were, identifying where the coastal boundary was. It is our contention, which I understand has been disputed by Attorney Zamarka and Attorney Reynolds and others, it was our view that we provided every single macro element and element of information required by the preliminary site plan regulation, and we explained this to the commission and the public in 2015. But the commission denied the rezoning by limiting the area to be rezoned from 123 acres to 36 acres, basically chopping 60% of the density that was being proposed out of the proposal. And you did so because you claimed that the applicant had not provided basically detailed final site plan type information. You said that we had not filed a full coastal site plan application, that we had not identified the exact location of all wetlands across the entire property, that we had not provided the location of sewage disposal and mapping. We had not provided a complete stormwater management plan, and we had not identified impacts on public health and safety. Those were your claims in denying the rezoning to affordable housing development. In addition, although it claimed to have issued an approval with conditions, the Commission's action on Landmark's conceptual site plan, or preliminary site plan, specified the need for test borings for all detention basins, pollutant loading analysis, assessment of water quality basins for total suspended solids, and my personal favorite, analysis of total metals for brake pads at the preliminary site plan stage. This makes no sense. Many of the details simply not appropriate at the master plan stage. Now, we pursued this in court for several years, but then after we received finally our sewer approval, a delay because of the pandemic, we decided that the better course at this point for Landmark was not to wait and try to prevail in the appeal and then come back with a new master plan, but to try to push the ball forward by proposing a regulation that more specifically says master plan, so that there would be no doubt about the interpretation. But the starting point was that, in our view, the Commission's action in 2015 basically eviscerated the master plan or preliminary site plan and then final site plan sequence from the regulation. So the purpose of the application tonight is to clarify beyond any discussion that the regulatory process for affordable housing applications will use this two-step process as used in Darrow Pond, as used in Gateway, and provide this applicant with equal treatment. Now, I want to advert for a minute to some very important facts about Landmark's property, which unfortunately get cheerfully ignored by the opponents year after year. Landmark owns 236 acres purchased in 1998. There are approximately 60 acres on the west end of the property that are inside the town sewer district, adjacent to the Deerfield development, which is a large multifamily affordable housing development. Minimal wetlands, relatively flat, zoned as of right for residential development on 3-acre lots. Everybody seems to ignore that, especially when they talk about this property being coveted by the town for open space. A developer could go in there tomorrow and develop this entire 236 acres right down to the water with 3-acre lots. I've never heard Save the Sound or Friends of Oskawachi Hills complain about that aspect of the zoning. And in partial response to Ms. Balint's letter from DEP, almost all of this 60 acres is outside of the coastal boundary. Those are facts, and those are often ignored. Now, the Gateway, the Darrow Pond development, again, about 600 units proposed in the mid-2000s, ended up in what is still Section 12A of the Commission zoning regulations, and that provides very clearly for a master plan, final site plan structure. The Gateway development, less than half a mile from Landmark, in March of 2008, and this is in the supplemental materials that we provided to you, very clearly in March of 2008, the Commission approved a text amendment to set up a master plan procedure to identify the macro elements before anything else moved forward, to defer wetlands, grading, stormwater, engineering, sewers, water, and other detailed engineering issues to the site plan stage. And then in July of 2008, there was actually a master plan that put meat on the bones of what had been approved in the regulation. And then in June 2013, the site plan was approved in one night with such comments as, oh, well, we all know the sewer is available. Okay, that's not an issue. Please issue your approval. And then, of course, the Landmark application, as I described, went in quite a different direction in 2015. So the regulation amendments that we have proposed has sort of two primary elements. We tried to put the changes in boldface type so you can see what is being amended. We did try to tighten up some of the standards, dimensional standards, to give the Commission more control and a better understanding of what the eventual master plan development proposed would be. But most importantly, in 32.9, we tried to take from Darrow Pond and Gateway and the long history of this matter and come up with a master plan regulation that includes all the macro elements, but in keeping with its purpose, defers the detail to a later stage. I do want to very strongly emphasize that anybody who suggests that this structure is an attempt to evade regulatory review at the front end or the back end is simply not understanding the process. At some point or another, everything, all the detailed engineering that goes into stormwater and wetlands will be in front of the Commission. The principle is that if you approve macro elements and then the site plan conforms to those macro elements, the applicant is entitled to approval, which only means you can't go back and then disapprove the master plan when you get to the final site plan stage. But that doesn't mean that anybody is evading coastal regulations or 830G regulations, or the Commission is not given all the rights and obligations that it has in the development process. This is a way to defer engineering on a large development to a later stage. I want to respond a little bit to the letter from the Planning Commission. As a point of information, we were not notified or invited to the Planning Commission meeting of September 1st, which is very unfortunate. Mr. Geishel knows how to reach me. But the letter that the Planning Commission provided is just incorrect. They say that the regulation proposed does not encourage affordable housing. Well, absolutely it does, because it defers the very expensive detailed engineering to a later stage and allows the applicant to propose the macro elements up front. The Planning Commission says we don't know the residential makeup. For 13 years, this has been 1- and 2-bedroom rental units, not age restricted. I'm not sure what the mystery is there. They say it eliminates the need for an impact statement. No, it defers the detailed impact statement to the site plan stage, where the commission, again, will retain all of its rights, but it doesn't eliminate it and it doesn't evade it. It says that there's a reduction in engineering standards. Not even sure what that means, but it's completely wrong. There's no reduction in engineering standards. It says we have increased the building height. Well, yes, we're coming in with apartment buildings, which are going to be a little taller than single-family homes, probably on the order of 3 stories. So that should not be a surprise. It says by reducing setbacks and buffer, there may be creating negative environmental impacts. Well, you can't determine that at this stage. That's a good example of what we're saying here, that that we're trying to move the commission away from insisting on micro-level details when they're not necessary. And then it says the proposed regulation is essentially the same as the existing 32.9.1. Well, I'm going back on the history of 2015. It certainly wasn't viewed as the same back then, and so we are here to try to clarify that. I have similar comments, which I'm not going to go into in detail, about the letter from Marcy Belenta, DEP, but pretty much everything she says, I'll give you one example. Her paragraph 2. The section suggests that coastal section 109 would not apply as statutorily required. Who said that? We're not evading coastal site plan. We can't. It's a statutory and regulatory requirement. So Ms. Belenta is making up things that don't exist. And of course, quite candidly, she has a long history in this matter of making comments that are not within her authority or her official role at DEP. But throughout her comments, as read by, I believe it was Mr. Snyder, she says they forced the commission to make a decision without the benefit of resource and water quality considerations. No, we're asking to show the layout of the buildings and to do the detailed stormwater engineering based on the layout of the buildings of the roads at a later time after we've all agreed on what is going to be developed, what is not going to be developed, where is the significant open space going to be, and so forth. Mr. Chairman and Commission members, I realize I've been very strident, but the letter from the Planning Commission, the letter from DEP are evocative of exactly the problem that we ran into in 2015. We're trying to, believe it or not, move this to a process that will benefit everyone, not evading anything, but doing this in a common sense way, and indeed a way that this commission has successfully governed development for Gateway and Darrow Pond in the past, a process that you're very familiar with, and we'd like to be the beneficiaries of equal treatment because it makes sense and it's the way to do development on a large parcel. So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I will stop there. As I said, we're not insisting that we close the hearing. Our request would be to keep it open for at least one more hearing so we can respond to what we're probably going to hear now from those who have a different viewpoint. So I will stop there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Hollister. And I will just assure you that we are a very autonomous commission. We take into account these letters that we get from various, excuse me, referrals with certain applications. But you know, we know how to do our job in our legislative capacity, and we're gonna take a very close look at this application. I can assure you of that. And with that said, I think we'll move right on to reading some of these letters. Terry, I can assist you. We can go back and forth, or maybe a few of the other commission members can help out as well. But we have a good number of letters from the public to read into the record at this point. So everybody just kind of bear with us.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Russo? Yes. So as part of the applicant's application, I'd like to speak now and not have to wait to the end of all these letters. So a few points that I would like to make. Number one is that the commission was ordered by the Judge Fazzini to create a two-stop process. In fact, the town was ordered to adopt our regulations. Our regulations were drafted utilizing the existing regulations of the SUE, a special exception SUE. And in fact, they are almost identical. And we actually offer more information than the SUE does under Section 12A. And so we called the Stage 1 a preliminary site plan and Stage 2 a final site plan. And so this application requests to re-identify the preliminary site plan definition. So instead of using the word preliminary site plan, we simply are inserting the word master plan. That's the extent of the master plan aspect of this. Our preliminary site plan was in every form a master plan. The commission put forth that they were confused by the preliminary site plan, maybe because it had the word site plan in it. I'm not quite sure, but in order to potentially avoid the commission potentially being confused in the future, we decided to rename the preliminary site plan master plan. But that's the name. The definition that goes with it, the text that went with it, is unchanged. It's really, what are we naming it? And which is master plan. The other thing that we did was we added some detail to a few of the sections, tightening up the language. Other than that, as your planning commission said, which is the planning commission's last paragraph, is probably our strongest piece of evidence, in that it says this is essentially, what they're proposing is essentially the same as what is there. So I don't think the commission should have any issue approving a plan that their planning department says is essentially the same. I mean, should have any problem approving the text of what your planning department says is essentially the same regarding the two-step process. The two-step process was used for Darrow Pond under a set of regulations. It was also used for a Gateway under a different set of regulations. And Judge Fazzini quite clearly said that Mr. Russo is entitled to be afforded that same two-step process. The town is comfortable with it. They've used it in the past. They've approved projects in the past. They've gone through after the a master plan with a final site plan. And what we're saying, and what Tim is saying, is that it's not an issue of not getting the information. It's always been an issue of timing because of the size of the project. And again, the town followed the requirement of the judge on the remand and actually adopted a set of regulations, which we have before us in existing regulations, that has already established a level of detail that we need to submit for stage 1, which we call the preliminary site plan. The problem is that after the court ordered it and the town adopted it, the regulation, and it's our opinion and it's on our appeal, that the commission didn't follow the two-step process, pretty much ignored the two-step process and started asking for the detailed information again, and that's what Tim brought up. But in essence, we are making very little changes to the text. We're changing the definition, as I spoke to, from preliminary site plan to master plan, and we tighten up some of the language and added some additional details in a very limited manner. So we're not asking for a complete rewrite. This is, in fact, very, very similar to what the court had ordered the town to adopt and what the town actually did adopt. And so that's my thoughts on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. Appreciate that. All right, very well. Moving right along. Did Attorney Hollister have anything else to add before we go to the letters from the public?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Hollister. So we'll move on to public comment, and Terry, you can go ahead and begin. Do you want to read that first letter? I believe it's,
Friends of
let's see, it's
Oswegatchie Hills.
from Oswegatchie Hills Nature Preserve. Their president, I believe, or the person. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So this is a letter dated September 28th, 2020, from the Friends of the Oswegatchie Hills Nature Preserve. Dear Chairman Walker and commissioners of the East Lyme Zoning Commission, I am writing to you as president of the Friends of Oswegatchie Hills Nature Preserve to express our opposition to the proposed amendment to the East Lyme zoning affordable housing regulations. As you know, our organization, in coordination with the Town of East Lyme and the East Lyme Land Trust, is chiefly responsible for the maintenance of the nature preserve known as Oswegatchie Hills Nature Preserve, which abuts the property of the landmark development. Our organization has reviewed and opposes the application to amend Section 32 of the East Lyme Affordable Housing Zoning Regulations, hereafter known as Section 32, submitted by Landmark Development Group LLC and Jarvis of Cheshire LLC, hereafter Landmark. The proposed amendments to Section 32 are yet another attempt by Landmark to establish a zoning approval scheme that substantially minimizes the detailed information that this commission is required by law to receive and to review in order to determine whether a development application will cause health, safety, environment, and coastal concerns. This request is striking in that it was Landmark itself that drafted Section 32 and is stipulated to this approval and the review process with the town, and now they propose to, quote, cherry pick, end quote, many sections of those very regulations to favor their one specific application. By Landmark's own admission in its council's cover letter to this application, it represents that, quote, the intent of this amendment is to prohibit and avoid the demands for unnecessary and costly engineering at a first stage, end quote. In requesting this change, Landmark is attempting to remove the commission's discretion and to make approval mandatory at the first stage. This attempt to provide as little information to the commission as possible up front and to then lock in a mandatory approval with no discretion completely violates the 2011 court order of the Connecticut Superior Court. The court ordered that the approval process must not eliminate the requirements that a developer submit the type of detailed information before approval has become mandatory that the commission needs to determine whether environmental, health, and safety impacts would result from the proposal. In compliance with that order, Section 32 was adopted by both this commission and Landmark in a stipulated agreement in 2013. These affordable housing regulations have been used successfully in their current format by developers who have obtained approvals based on these regulations and built affordable residential housing in town currently and in the past. They are in place to be applied uniformly and fairly to all future applications and must be appropriate for use town-wide. In fact, in 2015, Landmark itself utilized these regulations and obtained zoning approval subject to certain conditions imposed by this commission. Rather than taking, quote, yes, end quote, for an answer and attempting to comply with your conditions, Landmark has now filed this application to again try to change the rules that apply to all solely to benefit itself. To accomplish this goal, Landmark proposes that you now adopt a master development plan sequence similar to that which was adopted for the Gateway development for affordable housing projects, and to, quote, cherry pick, end quote, certain elements of that planning process that is deemed beneficial to its plans. This continues a pattern that Landmark has tried to use over the years of comparing approvals of other projects in other parts of town to itself. In this case, the differences between the Gateway and Landmark developments and properties are substantial and stark. The Gateway Planned Development District, known as GPDD, was added as Section 11A of the zoning regulations in 2001. The first sentence states, quote, purpose, coordinate development of properties under separate ownership, end quote. Section 11A(9) adds the master development plan, thereafter MDP, as, quote, an alternative to the traditional parcel by parcel development, end quote. Section 11A(9)(1) states that, quote, the purpose of the MDP process is to encourage the comprehensive planning of the coordinated mixed-use development of the multiple parcels within the district, end quote. Furthermore, the Gateway District and Master Plan was conceived by the town rather than a particular developer as a way to attain very specific goals. In fact, Landmark's proposal in Oswegatchie Hills meets none of the four approval criteria as a zoning commission defined in 2001, parentheses, 11 years before the affordable housing regulations were adopted, close parentheses. The approval criteria as listed in 11A(9)(5) is 1. Consistency with the plan of conservation and development. 2. Consistency with the goal to be brought in the tax base. 3. Consistency with the purpose of the alternative MDP process. And 4. Provisions for necessary utility and traffic infrastructure. A master plan can be denied for any one of those criteria. The landmark Oswegatchie Hills plan fails on all four criteria. Excuse me. 1. The POCD shows Oswegatchie Hills as an open space and reiterates that that has been the wish of the town for decades and well before Landmark began its development efforts. By contrast, East Lyme engaged the Yale Urban Design Workshop to interview townspeople about desired uses, and the Zoning Commission incorporated as Figure A in Section 11A(8) Yale's proposed April 1997 sketch for Gateway. 2. Numerous studies show that residential development adds more municipal costs for services than this generated by the tax revenues. 3. As stated above, quote, the purpose of the MDP process is to encourage the comprehensive planning and coordinated mixed-use development of multiple parcels within a district, end quote. And 4. Landmark's proposed text amendment removes from 32(9)(2) the requirement that the developer demonstrate it can provide water and sewer or community septic and water or a combined of public and on-site or community water waste disposal. The differences between Gateway and Landmark's proposed project are substantial. Gateway includes a large commercial/retail component. It had multiple landowners. It was targeted for development. The GPDD was proposed by the town, and it was fully within the town's sewer service district. By contrast, Landmark proposes a residential-only development. It has single ownership. Its development is inconsistent with the POCD. Its regulations were drafted by the developer, and it is only partially within the town sewer service district. While all of these contrasts between Gateway and Oswegatchie Hills are important, the most important by far is the fact that the Gateway property slopes down to one of the nation's largest highways, I-95. Oswegatchie Hills slopes down to the beautiful but very environmentally sensitive Niantic River. Whew. The net result of this proposal is a watered-down AHD regulation portion and a watered-down master plan portion customized and combined to suit the specific goals of one particular application. We urge the Commission to deny Landmark's self-serving proposed amendments so that it will continue to be provided with all the necessary information in order to make informed decisions on all affordable housing proposals that come before it. Thank you for your consideration. Kristen S. Lambert, President.
Thanks, Terry. I'll go ahead and read the next letter. It's kind of a short one, but we'll take it from there.
Go ahead.
Second letter, the next letter is from Malcolm Hall of 4 South Drive, Niantic, Connecticut. And he writes, Dear Chairman Walker and Commissioners of the East Lyme Zoning Commission, I'm writing to you as a concerned citizen and a member of the Friends of Oswegatchie Hills Nature Preserve. I'm amazed that in this time of devastating climate change, developers will continue to try to undermine zoning regulations in order to comprise the integrity of our nature preserves. The Oswegatchie Preserve is a local treasure. To threaten its protection in order to build more luxury housing for the benefit of a few land speculators is just flat out wrong. As stewards of our community, your primary responsibility is more than simple to promote business and facilitate commerce. You are also charged with protecting our quality of life, which includes the quality of our environment. Please don't compromise the fragile protections that the Oswegatchie Hills now enjoy. Sincerely, Malcolm Hall. We move on to the next one, which is a long one. That's
You can have that one, Mr. Chairman.
that's the Save the Sound letter.
Correct.
I wish I had printed this one.
Oop, if not, I can try to go through it.
Why don't you
By all
start it?
means.
I'll jump in.
Okay, I will. It's from Save the Sound, dated September 30th, 2020. Dear Chairman Walker and Commissioners of the East Lyme Zoning Commission, I am writing on behalf of Save the Sound to oppose the application of Landmark Development Group. For example, the amendment to the East Lyme Affordable Housing Regulations. The application should be denied because, 1, the applicant has already formally stipulated to the existing AHD regulations and cannot, after the fact, claim that they are now somehow inconsistent or discriminatory. 2, the existing AHD regulations closely track Judge Frazzini's opinion in the applicant's case. 3, the applicant's proposed AHD regulations are inconsistent with Judge Frazzini's opinion in that they would allow for effective approval before meaningful engineering and environmental information had been submitted and review had been completed. And 4, the applicant fails to appreciate the very substantive differences between the proposed AHD regulations and the Gateway Plan Development District, which serve very different purposes and involve very different environmental considerations. Include some background. While the application seeks to change the AHD regulations for the entire town, it quite clearly addresses the applicant proposed development on Calkins Road in East Lyme as a sole basis to support the change. The property in question consists of 236 acres of steep-sloped, forested land adjacent to the Nyack River, which empties into the Long Island Sound. The property is situated in East Lyme portion of the Oswegatchie Hills area, an environmentally unique area where environmental agencies, the legislature, commissions, and towns are unanimous in their view that open space should be preserved and protected while dense development should be constrained. The proposed development has a long history in the East Lyme Zoning Commission and in the Connecticut courts. The applicant has made a number of highly inaccurate characterizations of this history, none of which are supported by any citations. The applicants have on 3 prior occasions sought the Commission's approval to develop dense housing on its property in some manner. All 3 applications were denied by the Commission primarily on the environmental grounds, and all 3 decisions were subsequently appealed to the Superior Court. In the first case, the court held that the Commission properly concluded that substantial public interest in preserving the Oswegatchie Hills as open space outweighed the need for affordable housing, known as Landmark 1, 2004, WL 216-6353 at *1. Judge Quinn noted that the record reflected a long history of efforts to preserve Oswegatchie Hills as open space, including 1. the comprehensive plan for the town in 1967, 2. an open space acquisition plan in 1974, 3. a 1977 report recommending purchase of the property outright by the town for preservation, 4. East Lyme's 1987 revision to its plan of development. 5, the legislature's designation of the area as a, quote, conservation zone, end quote. 5, and the establishment of the Niantic River Gateway Zone and a commission to preserve the character of the area. 1D at star 8. In the second proceeding, Judge Prescott held that commission appropriately denied the application for affordable housing due to open space and coastal management considerations. Landmark 2, 2008, WL 544646 at 1316. The, quote, lengthy history of preservation efforts alone make it apparent that the area has been under consideration for conservation due to its unique features for a long time. In addition, it is precisely some of the site's unique features, its fragile soils and rocky slopes, as well as any development's impact upon the water resources, which make it physically less suitable for dense development than other areas of the town. Citing Landmark 1.
I'll take over for a little bit.
Thank you.
The third case was decided in 2011 by Judge Frazzini, and the instant regulations were passed directly as a result of that decision. In this proceeding, like the others, the applicants sought to construct a high-density affordable housing development in the Oswegatchie Hills. The proposed development would feature 840 units, 408 one-bedroom apartment and 432 two-bedroom apartments, and 1,767 impervious parking spaces totaling 36 acres. The parking lot alone is 7 times the size of a super Stop and Shop parking lot. I'm not going to cite the sources. This proposal was initiated in 2005 when the applicants applied to the commission to request an affordable housing district zone change for all 236 acres. The commission denied that application, and the applicants subsequently appealed the denial to the Superior Court. As discussed more fully below, the Superior Court, Judge Frazzini found that 1, there was a substantial interest in preservation that outweighed the need for affordable housing. 2, there was insufficient information submitted by the applicant in the commission to make a final decision as to whether the AHD zone should be limited to the sewer service district or apply to the entire parcel. And 3, on remand to the commission, should create a preliminary and/or final site plan process to gather environmental information, and upon consideration of all of the environmental information, make a decision as to whether the AHD zone should remain limited to the sewer service district. On remand, the applicants stipulated with the commission to an AHD regulation, an existing AHD regulation, that would provide for process to effectuate Judge Frazzini's decision. Yet, in the proceedings on their application, the applicants refused to provide the required environmental information in certain instances and have provided incomplete or inadequate information in other instances in regards to wetlands and stormwater. While Save the Sound and others urged the commission to deny the preliminary application for failure to provide necessary information, the Zoning Commission, after a hearing, conditionally approved the application within the sewer district and deferred the consideration of the missing and deficient environmental information to later stages of the process. The next section is the applicant has already stipulated in the existing AHD regulations that it is now seeking to challenge. It is critical to note that the AHD regulation was not unilaterally passed by the commission, but it was negotiated between the commission and the applicants and fully agreed to, indeed formally stipulated to, by the applicant acting through its attorney. In its most recent appeal filed with the Superior Court, the applicant's attorney represents, quote, in April 2013, by stipulated judgment, the Zoning Commission adopted a zoning regulation text amendment which established the AHD Section 32 of the regulations, end quote. At the zoning hearing before the appeal, Attorney Hollister for the applicants explained, now in April 2013, Landmark and this commission reached a settlement which was approved by another Superior Court judge in Section 32, revised from, and that is at tab 3 of your March 4th, 2015 materials. So that's the Affordable Housing District regulation. That is the regulation upon which we're going to proceed in tonight's proceeding. Despite this, in the filing with this commission, the applicants inaccurately, or at the very least misleadingly, stated they had objected to a part of the provision without disclosing that they had in fact formally stipulated to the existing AHD regulation in their entirety. Excuse me. The applicant has always had very sophisticated and highly qualified counsel throughout this process and cannot now claim to be unaware of or somehow not responsible for what it has agreed to. To allow this would violate principles of res judica, consideration of judicial economy, and basic principles of justice and fairness. Indeed, there was good reason for the applicants to make this stipulation. As will be shown below, the stipulated regulations closely track and fully implement Judge Frazzini's decision. The next section heading is the existing AHD regulations are consistent with and closely track the court's decision. The applicants seek to remove the requirement for coastal zone information and for an adequate preliminary stormwater management plan. Yet this is precisely the environmental information that was required by Judge Frazzini to be submitted by the applicant and considered by the commission. The applicant inaccurately claims that Judge Frazzini's decision held that the commission could limit the proposed change to the sewer service district. In fact, Judge Frazzini's 2011 decision held that more detailed environmental information would be needed to make such a decision. The court stated, this is in bold print, there was sufficient evidence in the record to support the commission's reasons to deny a zone change for the entire applicant's property based on preserving open space and preventing adverse impact on environmental and coastal resources. Both of these are matters of substantial public interest, and the commission could consider and clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing. Without the types of information sought by the DEP, the court cannot find that the substantial public interest in avoiding damage to coastal resources or the environment could have been protected by expanding the change of zone from that approved by the commission, the area inside the town sewer service district, to the entire area covered by the site plan drawings. The substantial public interest in avoiding excessive environmental harm and damage to coastal resources can be protected, however, by a remand for the commission to amend its zoning regulations as specified above, for Landmark then to submit a preliminary or final site plan that provides the information necessary for the commission to assess these matters, and for the commission then to determine whether the substantial public interest in avoiding damage to coastal resources or the environment can be protected by expanding the change of zone from the approved by the commission, the area inside the town sewer service district, to the entire area covered by the site plan drawings. Coastal resources is the next heading. Consistently with Judge Frazzini's decision, the director of the Office of Long Island Sound Programs of DEP submitted a letter in the zoning proceeding stating that coastal information was, 1, required by the CCMA, and 2, not provided by the applicant. He stated that the applicant's proposed development was located partially within a coastal boundary that includes inland wetlands, and therefore the entire project was subject to coastal review under Connecticut General Statutes 22A 105B. The director explained that the proximity to the applicant's proposed development to these on-site wetlands and coastal resources would create, quote, almost certain impacts on the wetlands, habitat, and water quality, end quote. However, the applicant's failure to submit coastal resources information and a coastal site plan review application pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 22A 105B would make the calculation of, quote, precise harm to coastal resources at this site not comprehensively possible at this time, end quote. The director further stated that the applicant's proposed design is characterized by shallow depth to bedrock and steep slopes that would necessitate significant alterations of the site to prepare the land for road access and community septic. These alterations, quote, would create significant stormwater runoff that would adversely impact coastal resources and water quality, end quote. In addition, the alterations would, quote, cause potential sedimentation and erosion, nitrogen loading, and impacts on finfish, shellfish, and wildlife on the site along Latimer Brook, the Niantic River, and ultimately Long Island Sound, end quote. For these reasons, the director recommended the denial of the applicant's proposed zone change and the preliminary site plan. The applicant failed to rebut, respond, or address this evidence in any manner. Despite all this, the applicants boldly state that, quote, coastal resources information from DEEP was not required because none of the 36-acre residential development area was within the coastal zone and the driveway was already designed as exempt, end quote. The applicant's requested amendment seeks to limit the coastal zone resource consideration to the area strictly within the zone This violates Freseni's decision, DEP's recommendation of denial based upon coastal zone considerations, and the Connecticut Coastal Management Act itself. Next heading
Mr.
is
Chairman,
wetland.
you good?
Yes, sir.
You
Wanna
good?
take over? Yeah,
I
go
will.
ahead.
Give you a break.
Wetlands.
Wetlands. The applicants also claim that they submitted the location of wetlands. Yet, soil scientist John Ianni established that the applicants had failed to properly identify and delineate at least one significant vernal pool containing wetland that was on their property. To reference, the applicants did not seek to rebut, contradict, or respond in any manner of this evidence. The requirement to provide wetland information necessarily includes the requirement to provide accurate wetlands information. They failed to do so. Stormwater. The applicants also neglect to mention all of the problems identified with its preliminary stormwater plan. The plan was found to be deficient by engineer Stephen Trinkots in a manner that would lead the channelization and negatively impact the environment. This information was neither contested nor responded to by the applicant. Instead of seeking to correct these problems, the applicant has sought to amend the regulation to limit what kind of stormwater information could be required by the Zoning Commission. It should be noted that the GPDD, Gateway Plan Development District, actually requires not only an adequate preliminary stormwater plan, but a full stormwater plan, section 11A-H1. Thus, the uncontested record shows that the applicants have failed altogether to submit the required coastal information and have submitted inadequate and inaccurate information regarding both stormwater and wetlands. Instead of seeking to submit complete and accurate information, Landmark now seeks to amend the regulations themselves to eliminate the need for this information. Yet this is precisely the information that Freseni required before a final decision as to whether to increase the size of the zone beyond the sewer service district could be made. In bold, Judge Freseni's decision explicitly required the applicant to submit substantive information on impact to the environment and for the commission to consider it through a preliminary or final site plan process. The applicant's main substantive contention is that Judge Freseni's decision prohibits the current preliminary and final site plan process, but instead requires the alternative master plan process set out by the applicant. There was, of course, no reference to a, quote, master plan, end quote, in Judge Freseni's decision quoted above, and certainly no requirement for one. Instead, the two ways that the judge provided environmental information could be provided was either through a preliminary or a final site plan. That is precisely what the existing AHD regulations implements. The idea that it was required to be a, quote, master plan, end quote, originates wholly within the mind of the applicant, has no basis in any prior judicial decisions. In fact, the decision made clear that unless and until the applicant submitted the actual environmental information, a final decision could not be made on the size and extent of the HD zone. What the applicant actually seeks is entitlement to an approval that becomes binding upon the commission in a later stage without having submitted engineering, environmental, or other information. This is what the applicant unsuccessfully sought from Judge Freseni and continues to seek now. This not only defies common sense and the most basic principles of the good government, but it defies Judge Freseni's decision, applicable law, and the applicant's own stipulation. Bold print, the GPDD Gateway Plan Development District served a different purpose in that applied to a multi-use, multi-parcel property that was, one, located wholly within the sewer district, two, consistent with the plan of conservation and development, and three, entirely outside the coastal zone. The applicants essentially argue that this commission should now disregard Judge Freseni's decision and their prior stipulation and instead adopt a new process that includes the parts of a separate master plan regulation that would be most advantageous to the applicants while excluding those aspects of the master plan process that would prohibit the applicant's development. The master plan process was created for a very different purpose from the AHD regulations. The master plan purpose is to, quote, coordinate development of properties under separate ownership and provide safeguards that one or another early development does not jeopardize maximum build-out, end quote. Section 11A. The purpose of the AHD regulations is to, quote, provide for, encourage, and accommodate affordable housing, end quote. Section 32.1. There are also very significant differences between the applicant's proposal and the gateway development. First, the entire gateway parcel is within the sewer service district and was required to be pursuant to section 11A.5.2, which only allows discharges into the sewer system. Yet the applicants object to being confined to the sewer service district and are seeking to expand the zone beyond that. Second, the master plan, requires a showing of consistency with the POCD. Section the applicant's development as set forth would not meet such a threshold. Finally, the entire gateway parcel is located outside the coastal zone. Thus, DWP did not submit comments and did not recommend rejection of that master plan on environmental grounds as they have in the applicant's case. In conclusion, for the foregoing reasons, Save the Sound hereby urges the Commission to reject Landmark's application for a regulation change. Respectfully submitted, Save the Sound, Roger Reynolds.
Thank you. The next letter I'll read is it's short and sweet. It's written by Karen Blaustein of 1 Marjorie's Way in Niantic. And it reads, in reading over the information regarding the recent application, it seems as if Landmark is just trying to get around provisions they helped set up. I do not oppose new construction in East Lyme, but it is vital that the Zoning Commission be allowed to evaluate any new applications on its environmental impact and not have their hands tied for future situations. The next letter is, let's see.
From Kathleen Cooper. Dear Chairman Walker and Commissioners of the East Lyme Zoning Commission, I wish to communicate that I heartily agree with all the points made by Kristen Lambert in her eloquent and informed letter to you dated September 28th, which she quoted down below. Please protect our fragile ecosystem and beautiful open spaces. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Very respectfully, Kathleen Cooper, and she included a copy of Oswegatchie Hills letter.
Okay, we've already read that letter, right?
Yes, we did, correct. Yep, that was,
Okay.
I believe, Exhibit H, I believe.
Excellent.
Like
All right, so
that.
good. Next one
go
is Jonathan G. Lincoln of 37 Hillwood Drive, Niantic. Dear Chairman Walker and Commissioners of the East Lyme Zoning Commission, I'm writing to you to express my opposition to the proposed amendment to the East Lyme Affordable Housing Regulations related to the Landmark development property. Thank you for your consideration, Jonathan Lincoln. That's very good. And moving on to the next letter, which is from Fred Grimsey, President, Save the River, Save the Hills. And it reads, Dear Chairman Walker and Commissioners of the East Lyme Zoning Commission, I am writing to you as President of Save the River, Save the Hills to oppose the application of Landmark Development Group and all for the amendment to the East Lyme Affordable Housing Regulations. We are a nonprofit 501c3 grassroots environmental organization based on the Niantic River Estuary in Connecticut. Our organization is dedicated to preserving the health of the Niantic River Estuary, its watershed in the towns of East Lyme, Montville, Salem, and Waterford, and the natural beauty of the Oswegatchie Hills. It is our longstanding position that the best use of the fragile coastal forest is as open space to protect the Niantic River Estuary of Long Island Sound. The land and the water are natural treasures to be protected now and for future generations. The Niantic River Estuary is a unique habitat for Long Island Sound. While the river is safe for swimming and fishing, the habitat struggles due to nitrogen pollution coming from the people, living in the watershed, the area of land that drains to the Niantic River via streams, rivers, and groundwater, coupled with rising temperatures. The Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection has listed the Niantic River on the impaired waters list of the state of Connecticut. The river is impaired as a habitat for marine fish, other aquatic life, and wildlife. Potential causes for this impairment include eutrophication resulting from nutrients with sources such as industrial point source discharges, illicit discharges, remediation sites, groundwater contamination, and insufficient septic systems. Other more general sources of elevated nutrients include atmospheric deposition, stormwater runoff, and groundwater discharge from developed areas, including discharge from septic systems adjacent to the Niantic River. The proposed text change in East Lyme's existing AHD regulations appear to be a blatant move by Landmark Development to avoid providing detailed environmental information and development plans in to the town's regulatory agencies for their review and final decisions. Past judicial decisions in the ongoing litigation have already found that insufficient information was submitted by Landmark Development to the Zoning Commission to make a final decision on the proposed development. The judge remanded the decision back to the commission to create a preliminary and a final site plan process to gather such environmental information. Reverting to the use of a master plan approval process with watered down provisions as proposed by Landmark would allow the developer to obtain approval to build in Oswegatchie Hills before providing the meaningful environmental information required by judges who have already ruled that Landmark should provide this information to the Zoning Commission. Zoning regulations are designed to be applied fairly to all proposed projects in town. For 5 years, the town of East Lyme and other developers have effectively used the existing AHD regulations, which Landmark Development participated in writing, to obtain several affordable housing approvals in town. We respectfully request that you recognize the proposed text changes for what they are: self-serving changes aimed at pushing through one project and not accept them. That's from Fred Grimsey, President, Save the River, Save the Hills.
Next, I got the next one, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. Next one is from Foster. Go ahead.
That's correct. Dear Sir or Madam, I am writing to voice my support for blocking any and all development of the Oswegatchie Hill Nature Preserve. I am, like so many residents of East Lyme, appalled at the constant attempts by Landmark Development to ruin this gem of a property that is used and loved by so many of us living in East Lyme. The tactics used by Landmark have cost our town dearly, both in treasure and time, and we are at a point in history when the hills need to be protected once and for all. I have personally enjoyed the preserve for years and can be found hiking there throughout the year. I have introduced the preserve to over 25 people, all of whom are amazed that right here in town of Niantic, we have such a wonderful facility. To lose even an acre of this land would be a travesty, and I beg the town to continue the fight to fend off development of any kind. Please forward my email to the appropriate people, the town government, the permanent record. Many thanks, Nancy Pomeroy Foster.
Very good. And I think I have the last letter, unless there have been more letters submitted today, or no, we're good? This is it?
You're at the last one, yep.
Excellent. The last one is from Donald W. Gerwick. Dear Commissioners, as a resident of East Lyme, I am strongly opposed to the proposed revision of the current Affordable Housing District regulations that is to be considered at tonight's Zoning Commission meeting. A regulation in any form that does not allow or limits a commission to legally require information related to potential environmental impacts of a proposed development, in my opinion, is simply putting the cart before the horse. I further believe that commissions cannot make truly informed decisions without full knowledge of all impacts, including, and perhaps most importantly, environmental impacts. I respectfully request the Commission to deny the proposed regulation change. Donald W. Gerwick, P-E-L-S. All right. And now I believe we'll be at the point now where we have some people who wish to speak. Have some people
Yes, I have a list.
initiated interest in speaking, Jen? Yes?
Yes, I do.
How many speakers do we have?
Right now I have 3 that have asked to speak.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Roger Reynolds is first. Go ahead, Roger, you're up.
Thank you. And thank
I would
you.
just ask Roger and for everybody out there before they speak, if you could please, I'm not going to put a time limit on it, but keep your comments reasonably brief, be succinct and concise and clear, and allow the next person to move to the podium. Thank you.
I will do that. Thank you, Chairman Walker and members of the commission. I will just summarize my comments here. In short, the applicants are seeking to do what they've been attempting to do for years, if not decades, to get a binding approval from this commission without having submitted the necessary and adequate environmental information. The commission has consistently declined to do this and has consistently been upheld by the courts, most recently in Judge Frazzini's 2011 decision. We recommend the commission deny the application in its entirety. Well, the application before you is to change zoning regulations for all projects in the entire town, past and present. The sole justification really relates to the single parcel owned by Landmark in the Oswegatchie Hills. This application has a long history, most or all of which has been affirmatively misrepresented by the applicant in his application. Two previous judges have denied applications on this parcel altogether because of overwhelming environmental concerns, while the applicant's attorney has said that it's Save the Sound and other environmental organizations who are the only ones who have environmental concerns. Three judges have actually ruled that there were overwhelming concerns and that this was inconsistent with the plan of conservation and development. The most recent judge refused to make a final ruling because the applicant had failed to submit the necessary environmental information to make a decision. It's critical to note that the applicant actually submitted the first draft of the current regulations and affirmatively and formally stipulated to the final regulations. I provided in the comments that you read the citations for this. You'll note that the application is notably absent of citations simply because there's no authority to support their multiple representations. Having stipulated to them, they can't now argue that they're somehow discriminatory or unfair. Or I suppose they can, but they can't do so logically or reasonably. And the reason the applicant stipulated to these regulations is actually quite simple. They were based on Judge Frazzini's 2011 ruling in this matter. This was a decision very similar to the present, where the applicant was seeking an approval to rezone an entire parcel without having first submitted environmental information. Judge found that there was sufficient information to deny the zone change for the entire property, which is contrary to the applicant's representations. And he found that on remand, the commission needed the environmental information to be submitted through either a preliminary or a final site plan. Either one, a final site plan would have been fine. Master plan was not mentioned, even though the GPDD was all, there, and the applicant had been arguing about gateway and all this stuff, but he didn't say master plan, he said preliminary or final site plan. And only after such information had been submitted could the commission make its decision. And that's precisely what the commission did in these regulations. As had been set forth in the written comments, the applicant had failed to submit the information, the coastal information, which the court focused on in particular, was not submitted at all, despite DEEP's letters, which Judge Frazzini relied on and referred to and asked them to respond to DEEP's requested information. DEEP in the previous proceedings indicated that coastal information was lacking, and on that basis recommended denial of the preliminary application. The commission didn't do that. They conditionally approved over our objections, but that's what DEEP and Judge Frazzini had stated and ruled. Stormwater information was completely inadequate. There was an expert who testified uncontested that this was a clear harm to the environment, and despite that, the applicant didn't try to rebut it, but now the applicant is seeking to eliminate the requirement for real stormwater information and seeking to literally write its own rules. Wetlands information, that information was incomplete, inaccurate, and this is the boldness of this applicant. They don't believe a requirement to delineate the wetlands is a requirement to delineate the wetlands accurately, despite the fact that it was uncontested that they delineated them inaccurately. The applicant is now saying, no, we delineated them. We deserve an approval. That's wrong, and we urge the commission to deny the application in its entirety. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. Next speaker.
We have Mike Sheehan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, Michael Sheehan, 52 Quarry Dock Road. I'll be brief here. My main concern with this is that this request is going to apply to the entire affordable housing regulations throughout the town, not just with respect to landmark. And my biggest concern is with respect to the part of it that basically removes the discretion that you have to make a decision on how an application is going to affect the health, the safety, the environment in our town, without having the necessary details at that time to make an educated determination and decision on the application in front of you. Now, this applicant, in some sense, I feel like we're kind of back in 2011 again, and Judge Frazzini, was addressing that issue in his decision when he said that at that point the applicant's requested amendment, the judge said the process proposed by Landmark had the defect of eliminating the requirement that a developer submit the type of detailed information before approval had become mandatory. The town's need to determine whether, for example, damaging environmental impact would result from a proposal. So the applicant is asking, in fact, in the cover letter, they say the intent of this amendment is to prohibit and avoid the demands for what they call unnecessary and costly engineering at the first stage. Well, that's fine, but they then go on to draft the requested amendment to require you to make a decision on the master plan with only having the macro elements and no engineering detail at that stage. Then when you get to the site plan approval stage, their request would be that as long as it substantially conforms to the previously approved master plan macro elements, again, the macro elements, not the detail, you wouldn't have the detail at that point. Well, you'd have it, but you wouldn't be able to apply it because then the site plan approval should be, quote, non-discretionary. So I really feel that this request is improper and it's violative of what Judge Frazzini back in 2011, what his decision called for. He said back then that if you approved what was requested back then, it would have allowed Landmark to obtain final approval of its affordable housing application without the commission ever knowing whether the development would cause environmental or coastal damage. I feel that they're asking you to do that again here, that it's improper, and so I urge you to deny the application.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
And we have one more speaker.
Yep, Mike Dunn wanted to speak. Mike, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. All right, Michael Dunn. My business address is 9 King Arthur Drive, Niantic, Connecticut. And earlier, Attorney Hollister stated that he wanted to make sure we were aware that he's allowed by right to develop a housing unit up there for every 3 acres. We are very well aware of that. And I'd like to ask Attorney Hollister if he's aware that he's asking for 840 units on 36 acres, which is, if you divide 840 by 36, it's 1/20th of an acre for each housing unit versus 3 acres. So it's 60 times more dense than what's allowed by right. And that intense density is why these environmental concerns are so important. You know, he kind of joked about, you know, being asked to do test borings, you know, for the water basins. Well, you can tell looking at lines on paper, combining that with free information you can get on soil surveys with the general type of soils that you have. And our engineer said, I mean, with the grading that he's proposing, he's talking about blasting 20 feet straight down into ledge to put water quality basins in, you know, the tiny little spot that they can fit between his development and the wetlands. And I submit that that's at a macro level indicative of a project that is infeasible. So, you know, it's not just detailed things that we're looking at. We're looking at big picture things. I'd like to respectfully say and sincerely say that each of you members on the zoning commission know better than I do that zoning regulations are intended to serve the entire town and be applied fairly to all applicants. These regulations, which were written by Landmark, have been successfully used throughout the town to approve other projects. So what you have before you tonight is a blatant attempt to customize the regulations to fit one project. They're proposing that you combine some cherry-picked changes to the AHD regulations that will customize them to serve their project with some watered-down portions of the gateway master planning, and they're excluding something important such as approval criteria. And as was mentioned in Chris's letter, if the 4 approval criteria for the Gateway Development District specified that a application there would be disapproved if any one of those 4 was not met. If they were to put those same 4 criteria in this proposed regulation, they would fail on all 4 criteria. And I'm not going to take time to reiterate what they are. We've already talked about that. So we basically see this as a trap to get you to approve a plan before you see what impact it's going to have on the town. So I appreciate your time, and that's what I have to say.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. The only thing left would be any questions by the commission. For me, I know that I intend to wait till the regular meeting for my comments. There's a lot for us to digest here. If there's anybody that has anything, you can go right ahead. And I'm not going to urge you not to. But for me, I think it's going to be wise to wait until the regular meeting and wait till we at least reach the conclusion of the public hearing, which I believe that, I don't want to speak for Attorney Hollister, I would never try to do that, but I believe he indicated earlier that he at least insinuated that he's going to be looking to continue this public hearing to the next meeting to allow time for him to adequately and properly respond to the various letters and the feedback that from the community and from a few of the organizations in the community. So
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
okay, thank you. So with that, I think that you are requesting that we continue the public hearing at this point, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So that's what we'll do. And we'll continue it until will it be the next meeting, Bill? Do we know, or do we not know?
Matt, do you want to ask Attorney Zamarka if he needs to contribute anything at this point, or if he's all set?
That's actually a great idea since he's here. Attorney Zamarka, my apologies. Is there anything that you wish to add or enlighten us with thus far with what we've heard from the applicant, from the various members of the community? We'd like to hear from you if you have anything that you'd like to add at this point.
No, there's nothing I'd add right now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Attorney Zamarka. Appreciate it. All right. So with that, we're going to move on.
Chairman, what is the continuation date, please?
Continuation date, Jen, Bill?
15th.
October 15th would be the next regularly scheduled meeting, so,
Mr. Chairman, I would add that I have nothing else on that agenda for the 15th, so there'll be plenty of time to
Okay.
discuss matters.
Is that plenty of time for Attorney Hollister? I don't know, in terms of the timeline with
That's
with
2
this
weeks.
application? It's 2
Yes.
weeks, that's fine.
That's fine.
That's
Thank
fine? Okay,
Yes,
excellent, very good. Thank you, Attorney Hollister.
thank you.
Okay. Moving right along, and the regular meeting, obviously, that'll be at another time. Item number 2 on the regular meeting segment is the request of Theodore A. Harris.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
That's being continued.
Thank you.
That matter is continued to the October 15, 2020 regular scheduled zoning meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Mulholland?
That's correct.
And Jen?
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
yes.
And then we have the approval of minutes of September 3rd. Has everybody had a chance to look through those? I'll take a motion if we're ready to do so. If there are those who raise your hand, if you want to take a minute or two to read through those. I'm not raising my hand, I'm just showing you how to raise your hand. All right, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Terrence Donovan, Commission member, I will make a motion to approve the meeting, the meeting minutes from September, what was it, 1st? 3rd?
3rd.
3rd, thank you, Jen.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It was Kim K.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I
So
will abstain.
501. All right. And moving right along. Old business, there is none. New business, any business on the floor? If any by the majority vote of the commission, does anybody have anything tonight? If not, we'll move to the zoning official.
Mr. Chairman, I won't belabor the evening. There's plenty going on in town. We're very busy. I think we're going to see a lot of new businesses next spring. A lot of folks are contacting my office. I've got a couple of restaurants in discussion. So while we're going to have some adverse impacts from the pandemic, it looks like there'll be a very quick recovery in Niantic for some folks.
That's great. We're going to need a bounce back. That's great.
Yep.
I have nothing
Thank you.
more.
Comments from ex officio. Roseanne is not here tonight. I think we've already established that. Comments from zoning board, liaison to planning. We have a few meetings coming up. Norm, looks like you're scheduled for the October 6th meeting. Are you aware of that?
It might be in my book, but thank you.
Yeah, you're scheduled for the October 6th meeting. It looks like Ann, you're scheduled for November 10th. And I am scheduled for December 1st, and that will close out 2020 as far as our responsibilities with attending planning meetings. Comments from chairman, I have none tonight. A lot of information to digest. I would just invite everyone to take a closer look at the text amendment. There's a lot of information for us to review before the next meeting. I'm certainly going to take some time to do that. I would encourage everyone else to do the same. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Kim Kaлагina.
Do we have a second? All those
Mr.
in
Dwyer,
favor?
second.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Brooke.
Good night.
Thank you, Jen. Support
You're
staff,
welcome.
unbelievable job, everyone. Thanks so much. Attorney Zamarka, thanks for being here.
How's retirement, Mr. Chairman?
I'm not really retired, but I mean,